I want to talk about this whole Will Smith slapping incident, not because it's such low-hanging fruit or because it's easy fodder for media commentary, but because it invites a discussion around a lot of the themes and topics which I find really interesting and I try to orbit around on this channel. One of the first things that stood out to me about this incident is that it's not very often that people lose their composure in such a dramatic way, especially in a place and a time where that kind of composure and etiquette and decorum are expected. And this is especially true for professional actors. But it seems like more and more lately, we can't keep up the act like everything is just okay, whether we're professionals or not. It suggests to me that a lot of people are at their breaking point these days, which is kind of a scary thing to admit. It seems like we're living in this tinderbox that is just ready to ignite. And that brings me to a critical question, which is, I wonder if there's anything we can do to dial this situation back. I wonder if we're at the point where conflict is inevitable, like the charges have been laid and there has to be some sort of explosion, or if there's if there's a way to untangle those knots and disassemble the fuses. So on the one hand, I sympathize with people like Will Smith, but also the revelatory nature of it all is significant in my mind. As a Catholic Christian, my thinking is always drawn to a sacramental interpretation of the things I experience or witness, which is this notion that the world we experience is very much enchanted, because a sacrament is a visible manifestation, like a sign or a symbol of an otherwise invisible reality. And we have, of course, specific sacraments defined in the life of the church that constitute our religious practice. But this sacramental view of things can go much further than what we formally think of as sacraments. For example, you and your body is a sacrament of your soul. It is the manifestation of the principle of your life. Your soul is what animates you and distinguishes you as something that is alive rather than inanimate. And that animation of your body is the sacrament of your life. Our words and the things that we choose to communicate are sacramental manifestations of our thoughts. Our thoughts are otherwise invisible, but still very much part of the fabric of reality. But it's only when we choose to incarnate them with our words that in space and time that they take on a much more profound life and existence. And the most profound sacrament of all, if you're a Christian, is the visible incarnation of the otherwise invisible God. God, the ground of all being and reality, became human. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us so that he might be available to us in the most accessible way we can encounter him, in space and time, in material reality. Which means that we can see him, we can touch him, we can listen to him, and that this wasn't just meant for the first generation of his followers. It was meant to echo through every generation of his followers. Every generation can encounter the incarnation of divinity through the sacraments of the church. So obviously there's something very important to God by design in this whole sacramental pattern in the world that we are living in. Truth is routinely revealed to us through these manifestations. What is comes to be known and accessible to us when the invisible becomes visible. Deception, on the other hand, and this is a critical thing to understand, is the reverse of that sacramental pattern. Again, speech is a sacrament of our thoughts and our knowledge. It is the materialization of true knowledge that we possess and which we share with others in the hopes that they will come to a better understanding of what is true. But to deceive is to convey information that isn't real at all. It's a manifestation of what is not. It's a sign not of some invisible reality, but of something that doesn't exist at all. It's an anti-sacrament, and that's why it's so egregious. And it isn't just produced in the things that we say when we just try to deceive people deliberately with the content of our thoughts and our words, but also in how we present ourselves, how sincere, how authentic, and how much integrity do we comport ourselves with. And actors are masters, literally professionals, at presenting a false exterior. Now, I'm not saying that they necessarily use it for the sake of deception, but of all the people who are less likely to allow some hidden vice or unattractive trait to manifest at an inopportune moment, It's someone who has mastered the art of portraying a false exterior. So to see that kind of rage and violence breach the facade of such a carefully crafted exterior facade in a ceremony like that, where such expectations on formality, etiquette, and decorum exist, it's an astonishing thing to witness. And later on in his acceptance speech, there was supposedly an apology. I had a tough time detecting it in there, but apparently, according to the headlines, there was an apology in there. But there also seemed to be a lot of rationalizing and implied justification for his actions. I was left with an impression that much of it was an attempt to portray some inherent virtue in what he was doing, like chivalry or fortitude in fiercely defending the honor of his family. But it was his final claim that love compels him to do crazy things that really got my attention. And just in my last video this past week, I spent a lot of time going through all these incoherent definitions of love that people have and that they operate under when they think of love. So I'm not going to reiterate those arguments here and how it is that I arrive at what I consider a coherent definition of love, but I'll rehearse the definition itself, which is to will the good of another as other. But long before you ever get to a concept like love or caritas, you have to understand what justice is, because justice is like the foundation of all ethics and moral conduct. Justice means giving what is due. And there's a lot of teaching in Scripture, in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, in which God tries to reveal this law and all of these lessons to explain what justice is, especially in the old Mosaic law. And you've probably heard it before. There's this one that appears in the book of Exodus where it says, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, etc. And ironically, this is often characterized in contemporary times as some sort of escalation of evil and something that is an indictment of the Bible and its poor sense of ethics. Like if someone injures you, you should actually add more injury, as if two wrongs make a right. But that isn't the point of that teaching at all. The point is to actually exercise restraint, that in any retributive justice, the victim's compensation cannot exceed their own injury. So if someone steals your car, for example, you don't get to go and then firebomb their house. You get compensated for what you've lost and nothing more than that. And that's important because when we suffer an unprovoked injury, when someone targets us as a victim and we didn't do anything to invite that injury, it's really easy to respond instinctively, to feel like we're justified in getting them back worse than they got us. But God in this scripture verse and in this law is giving us an important lesson about what justice means, and that it means that we have to exercise restraint against that instinct, because that instinct will arrive and tempt us, so that we never go beyond what is due. And this is something that we have to learn to appreciate long before we ever get to concepts like love. And if you're the kind of person, like I have been at points in my life, who gets hung up on this idea of retributive justice, like it's not okay to punish somebody for the evil that they've done, I think it's important to come to some understanding and appreciation for the fact that when people injure victims, when they do malevolent deeds against other people, it's often because they lack empathy for their victims. Sometimes being made a victim of the very same crime that they committed against somebody else is the only antidote to the evil indifference that they have towards their victims. Sometimes feeling the suffering of your victims is what will help you appreciate the nature of that evil in order to turn away from it. And like I said, before you ever get to love, you have to get justice right, which is why there is a progression of revelation in Scripture. God introduces these ethical laws to the people of Israel to depict justice for them, and then allows them time to wrestle with it and to try to implement it for generation after generation, until finally, in his good timing, he can escalate their understanding of what is good and true in Jesus' teachings about loving your neighbor as yourself. So when Smith, again at the end of his speech, implies that he did what he did out of love because love compels him to do crazy things, I mean, I can sympathize with the fact that his feelings might compel him to do crazy things, but love ain't a feeling, as I argued in my last video. Love does not compel us to escalate evil with even further evil of our own, and that's what happened in this case. Chris Rock told a joke about Smith's wife, maybe even a mean-spirited joke, and Smith could have responded with words of his own. He could have said something afterwards like he didn't appreciate the joke, that his wife has a medical condition, and that on an evening that was supposed to commemorate an important occasion in his life and in his career, it kind of ruined the night with a cruel joke. That would have been an eye for an eye, and it probably would have been a lot more effective. Rock probably would have come away a lot more ashamed by his joke, and maybe that would have even compelled him to apologize. But instead, Smith chose to introduce an evil of his own, and a much greater evil, physical violence. And in so doing, he was not willing the good of himself, his wife, or Chris Rock in that instance. And the effects aren't an increase of peace or fraternity, which means we can really judge it by its fruits. Rock probably comes away with a much greater sense of injury than was necessary, and Smith also caused injury to himself and probably his wife in the process. So if it wasn't love that motivated him to do what he did, we might ask, what was it? I would say that it was the antithesis of love, which is pride, because pride cannot tolerate slights, embarrassment, or insults, even lighthearted insults. Love inspires us to treat our neighbors the way that we treat ourselves, but pride inspires animosity and rivalry between us and our neighbors. And it's in fact the source of all evil in the world. It's the reason why we do some of the most egregious things that we do. And it looked to me like Smith was satisfying the demands of his pride. And that act, that vivid and memorable scene slapping Chris Rock on live TV, I would say that was a sacrament, but it wasn't a sacrament of love. It wasn't the manifestation of love. It was the manifestation of pride. And to claim otherwise is an anti-sacrament, a deception that I think we should all do our best to see clearly through. Thanks for watching. The reason I can continue making content like this is because of the generous support of my viewers. If you feel called to support this work, then consider joining the Reinforcements, which is my online community. There are multiple tiers, including free access for those who can't help financially but still want to join. You can join up at www.brianholdsworth.ca. Certain levels will also get a free gift basket from Glory and Shine, who is a family-owned Catholic bath and body products company whose beard balm I'm wearing right now. It's like aromatherapy for your face. Even if you don't join, they make amazing products, so check them out at gloryandshine.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe. You don't have to agree with everything I said to get value out of these kinds of conversations, so be sure to subscribe to be edified or challenged. There's value in both.
Pray, brethren, that my sacrifice and yours may be acceptable to God the Almighty Father. May the Lord accept the